conducting World War II. So, World War II was really a major watershed moment in world history. How's this the case? Well, governments had been centralizing power for some time, but this really changed the way they were doing it. It was a whole new way. Their purpose now was to win global conflicts, but they were doing that in the context of industrialization. And this led into what we can call industrialized violence. This meant total warfare, and this meant that fighting would change in a way that we had never conceived before. Before this time, war always maintained a division between civilians and military, but this was about to dramatically change. During World War II, the strategy and weapons of each of the major powers were focused on entire populations. No longer would there be such a thing as the innocent civilian. Rather, everyone's really a target in this new form of warfare. Okay, let's look over a few examples. Number one, Fascist Germany. Okay, let's look over a few examples. Number one, Fascist Germany. Most people think that Adolf Hitler was unique in what he did within the German country. And in many ways, that's correct. Adolf Hitler won power in Germany largely due to his charismatic personality. He sold a message of national unification based upon an us versus them mentality. The them included communists, the so-called degenerates, and the Jewish population. He told the German people that they were not to blame for the loss in World War I. Rather, it was due to the weak leaders of the time, whom he labeled as the Jewish leaders who had sold out the German nation. He called for a Fatherland, or what he called the Lebensraum, in which Germany would expand and conquer all over Central Europe. Hitler also relied upon internal propaganda, especially in his genocidal attack on the Jewish population. Hitler's propaganda leader, Joseph Goebbels, once argued that if you tell a lie big enough and often enough, people are going to believe it. And this seemed to be the case with the attack on the Jewish people. Hitler's attack on them was extremely scientific. First, he claimed the Jews were an internal threat and simply needed to be segregated into ghettos. This allowed him to move them away from the rest of the population and depersonalize them. He also orchestrated what was called the Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. Brown shirts went throughout Berlin, destroying Jewish businesses. Ironically, at the end of this, Hitler claimed it was the communists and the Jews who had done all the violence. He then used that to claim that he needed emergency powers to try to imprison communists and Jews. As the war progressed, he moved the Jews from the ghettos into concentration camps. Now, since they were so far away from people could claim they just hadn't noticed what had happened. And these camps were placed far enough away from the cities that they didn't have to personally watch the eradication of the so-called Jewish problem. Hitler did need to dehumanize the Jews in order to justify in people's minds this mass eradication. This was done slowly and systematically. First, the Jews were labeled as enemies. Then, German children are subjected to films equating Jews to rats. There were even board games for children, and yes, this is literally what a board game was called, Jew Out, in which German children had to kick Jews out of the neighborhood in order to win. Germany became a centralized state. Hitler was the father figure. His bureaucrats ran the complexity of the state and industrial operations for military production, and his propaganda helped to demonize and make easier the eradication of an entire population. Okay, case number 2, Russia. Joseph Stalin ran a centralized, what was called totalitarian state. What does that mean? Well, Stalin had risen to power during the Communist Revolution in the 1920s. The original leader of the Bolsheviks was I.V. Lenin. Lenin died of a stroke, and right before he died, he warned the Communist Party not to put Stalin in charge, but it was too late. Stalin had put his loyalist followers in control of the party, government, and the media. He controlled the information and the bureaucracy in Russia. Stalin embraced a new system of collectivization of agriculture. Now, originally, that was not his idea. It was the idea of one of his opponents, Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was also a communist who favored the Russian Revolution. But Trotsky feared that Stalin was after power and only power. Stalin eventually had Trotsky exiled, and years later in Mexico City in 1940, Stalin's KGB tracked Trotsky down and killed him with an ice pick to the back of his head. Stalin instituted a collectivized system of agriculture. This meant that farmers had to pool all their land together communally, and the government would heavily tax the farming goods that were produced. The farming goods were sold on the international market, and the funds were used to industrialize the country. Stalin created 5-year plans for development. This did work for a while. In fact, Russia rapidly industrialized. Literacy rates went up, and Russia became a superpower. Stalin's one main threat came from within. Many of the farmers rebelled against his efforts to take away their land. In the Ukraine, the middle-class kulaks attempted to stop Stalin. So, Stalin had his police go house to house, removing their crops, blockading the roads, and this was all done during the winter season. This led to a massive man-made famine, killing over 5 million people. Stalin also tried to maintain peace with countries on his border. For example, he signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler's Germany. He promised to allow Hitler to train in Soviet areas if Hitler would not advance into Russia. Eventually, shocker of shockers, Hitler broke his promise. Hitler always wanted to do what only the Mongols could, conquer Russia. He would fail in this, but Stalin initially made the agreement to ensure that he would develop his country from within without any threat. Okay, example number 3, Japanese authoritarianism. In the 1920s, the Japanese were seeing new developments in their economy and their freedom. The Japanese economy had developed due to industrialization under the Meiji. A new feminist movement developed in Japan, demanding the right to vote for women. Young girls and boys mixed together more freely at dance halls. Union membership tripled. Literacy rates skyrocketed. However, the Japanese wealthy and bureaucrats feared that these responses were all signs of a radical revolution, like the communist one in Russia. Then the Great Depression hit. A lack of demand for silk tanked the Japanese economy. All this gave rise to what was called the Revolutionary Right. They issued the Cherry Blossom Society, a society demanding a return to traditional Japanese values. Now, no fascist party came to rise in Japan, but their ideas were adopted in the Japanese military leadership, and the emperor took on a father figure role over his children in the Japanese nation. The Japanese began to promote the idea that they were racially pure Asians over other areas like Korea, China, and Vietnam. Eventually, they would expand outwards and create the Manchukuo, or Asian Co-Prosperity Zone. Case number 4, the American response. Now, America waged the war after the attack of Pearl Harbor in 1941. Actually, Franklin Roosevelt, the U.S. president, had been trying to get involved in the war for several years. Initially, Roosevelt wanted to be neutral. He even avoided entry into the Spanish Civil War that was taking place between nationalists and fascists. Even the fascist leader of Spain, Francisco Franco, called Roosevelt a gentleman for his neutrality. Then Roosevelt realized that America had to slowly get involved. He initiated policies like Lend-Lease, where he would lend out military battleships and aircraft to the British. He even established a voluntary force to go to the European theater. But it would take the attack of Pearl Harbor for Americans to finally mobilize. Once this happened, American cities industrialized the war, producing massive amounts of war products. While primarily white males were off fighting in the war, minorities and women moved into urban centers and worked in factories to mass-produce war goods. This would be essential for understanding the huge demographic shift of people from rural to urban areas. One of the major changes that took place for all the combatants was the destruction of civilian areas. Germany, Britain, and the U.S. all used a new form of warfare called carpet bombing. Planes would fly over industrial cities and drop tons of armaments onto industrial centers. By the end of the war, this led to the deaths of over 500,000 people. The end of the war saw a use of a new type of weapon. German scientists initially came up with the idea. The idea was to use the most basic element of life, the atom. If we were to split the atom, something called fission, we would create enough energy from radiation to destroy an entire city. The U.S. set up a program, the Manhattan Project. There, the American scientists found success in the program. They produced 2 bombs, Fat Man and Little Boy. On August 6th, Fat Man was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. On August 9th, Little Boy was dropped on Nagasaki. Between the initial blasts and the eventual deaths from radiation poisoning, over 200,000 people died. The significance of carpet bombing, the use of atomic bombs, and the genocidal attack on Jewish people, the result was a total evisceration of the line between innocent and combatant. The end of World War II, though, brought a new mindset to trade, wars, and nations. At the end of this war, the Allies wanted to make a concerted effort that this time we would never see this kind of global conflict again. This time they agreed there was a need to take international action to stop the causes of World War II and World War I. At the Bretton Woods Conference in Vermont in 1944, the Allied leaders agreed that World War II was caused by a breakdown in global economics and by the lack of international political cooperation. So, they decided to take the following actions. And these really are 3 takeaways. Number 1, They would create a free market system of trade between the major countries. This included lowering tariffs or taxes on goods that were traded between countries. Number 2, they created an international institution called the International Monetary Fund to create rules for the international free trade. Number 3, they created a World Bank to provide funds to countries for development if they abided by the rules of the IMF. So really, in the end, the purpose behind all of this was to stop what was believed to have caused World War II. And what was believed was a destruction of the international economy, a lack of political collaboration, and this scientific racism that was used to label certain people as inferior. Okay, see you in class.